coach again. I am here with a colleague of mine who is a former admissions officer at Swarthmore and a few other institutions, Kennon Dick. Hi, Kennon.
Hi, Beth. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. This is Kennon. You may never have seen him before, but he has been a guest on the podcast in the past. And for today's purposes, he's really more here as the parent of a senior who's trying to make his college choices than as my colleague. It just so happens that he has all this insight about admissions and is a colleague. And we were talking the other day, and I thought that his experience might be helpful to those of you who have students who are trying to go through or make their final choice right now, or if you are a senior making your choice, I think that would be useful as well. So, Kennon, as established, you have a senior at home who didn't know where he wanted to go to college before coronavirus hit. At least, did he have all his decisions at that point, or were those still rolling in?
He had all of his decisions, but he hadn't really made up his mind as to where he wanted to go yet. And the hard part about the situation is that he had visited about half of the colleges that he was interested in, but the other half he wasn't able to visit. So this puts him in a little bit of a predicament in terms of being able to really compare apples to apples, and feeling like you've got a good feel for that campus before making that decision.
Right. So was the plan to visit?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
We had all these, the accepted students days, and they were kind of, all of those days had been planned out. And that was literally like a week or two before Corona kind of came into our consciousness and things started to cancel. And then all of a sudden, all of those plans, every single one of them went down.
Right.
So some schools have been really good at pivoting to a kind of a virtual visit and have been offering a lot of good videos and connections with current students and financial aid officers, as well as admissions people who are willing to help via Zoom chats and things of that nature. So it certainly feels more personal than it seems to have been in the past. But it's still, it's difficult when you're not able to see, the people on campus, see what the quad is like and how they interact, more organically and things of that nature.
Right. I mean, again, there is a reason that we say there is no true substitute for setting foot on campus. I think what I like about I'm always looking for silver linings, or I'm certainly looking for them these days. Every day I'm like, well, that's a silver lining. I guess one of the silver linings for seniors is that this may be forcing students to dig a little bit more deeply into the choice in ways that they probably should have been, right? So we're encouraging things like, look at course offerings in your majors of interest. Do they have the focus that you're interested in, right? Psychology is an example that I sometimes give. Maybe you want to study psychology, but your real focus is abnormal psych. Well, look at the psych department. Do they actually have courses in abnormal psych? Or is it kind of just like maybe they have one, or it's a survey course and it's really only part of that? So it is encouraging a deeper dive, but we know as well as anybody, right, that there's still no true substitute for setting foot on campus and making sure that what a school looks like on paper feels right in person.
Exactly.
So what's he doing? And what sparked my interest in you and I taping this video was that you said actually he really had been able to narrow some of the list down a bit. And so I was curious about how he has gone about that. And I'm also particularly curious if any of the schools that he didn't visited have wound up on that very short list that he's down to now.
Yeah, actually, two schools out of his top three, two schools he hasn't visited. And
interesting.
And one of the interesting things about that, I think, is that part of it is just how interested those schools are in him. And for one of the schools, the track coach reached out to him and said, this is our first year of track, and we're really interested in you as an athlete. And so that interest really piqued his enthusiasm for the school.
Makes sense.
A couple weeks later, the track coach for another school reached out to him and with kind of the same deal. And it was just, interesting to kind of see how all of a sudden that stock went up, right?
Right, right.
So that kind of opened the floodgates, and then he began talking to a variety of different coaches that has now kind of morphed into, well, let's talk to someone from the business department because that's your primary area of interest. He's
Hmm.
kind of undecided, but that's one thing he wants to explore. So I think now that he's used to talking to people who are contacts on
Yes.
campus, that has enabled him to be open to talking to advisors and things of that nature. So we have some of that scheduled for next week as well. But I think it's going to be those conversations. And one of them actually set up a meeting with a current student who I think is a junior or senior, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
And so that he can talk to one of their students kind of in a candid fashion about what their experience has been like and what they like about the school.
Right.
So I think, these are things that we often will suggest to students. My feeling is that, not the majority take us up on that.
Right, right. And
um,
so here he's not really being recruited per se, right? So he didn't get in because he's a recruited athlete. It's
correct.
just that these schools very smartly said, "Okay, what is this kid interested in?" And then had the appropriate department reach out. So it's a great example, I think, of how some schools are doing a really good job
Hmm.
of pivoting from admitted student days where this conversation might have had those conversations would happen more naturally to how do we make that happen. And if as with anything, right, some schools are going to do a better job at that than others. So that's we should send this to the colleges and say, hey, if you want an example of what to do, here you go, right here. One
Exactly.
other thing you shared is that, of course, like most of us, we are quarantining at home with our families. And I've mentioned my son, who is 16 and a sophomore in high school, and my stepson, who was just finishing up graduate school and is 23. We're all home together, quarantining together. You have a similar experience in your house, and that has actually had a positive impact on your son's college decision. So, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So my daughter, who is a senior in college, and she, of course, had to come home in mid-semester. So it's kind of interesting to be able to see her in action. And one of the things that I think is most important about that is just what that schedule is going to look like and what it takes for you to be kind of on task and keep track of your assignments and time manage. So he's kind of seeing her do it in real time.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that that's helping him. At least it's a good model for him in terms of how to finish out his year because it's all online, of course, and also getting him, I think, more enthusiastic about what that experience is going to look like next year for him.
Right.
And so I think the flexibility of the college schedule is, I think a lot of students kind of think about it in the same way high school is, right? So you're in
Right.
class for 7 hours a day, and then you come home after practice, and it's, you're trying to get your homework done, and it's a much more compressed daily routine. And now he's seeing it in the type of flexibility that she has, and I think that feels much more comfortable for him. So he's getting
Right. So
excited about that.
and that's exciting because based on our conversations, well, not based on our conversations, but based on seniors in general,
Mhm.
I think at this time of year, sometimes we see it happen where kids are kind of clinging to high school. Maybe they don't really want to think about the next step. And that makes it even harder to make a choice because they're becoming ambivalent for whatever reason about making that next step. So the beauty of your son kind of seeing what your daughter is going through probably helps to wipe that ambivalence away a bit, like, oh wait, this is going to be way better, or
Way
at
better.
least a change at the very least, and I need a change. So
Hmm.
that's exciting. um
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to share, or when do you think he'll be making that final decision, and anything else you guys are preparing for before you get to that point?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that have come through just recently is that in addition to the soccer or the track coach, the soccer coach also actually reached out to him and said, because their recruiting class is a little bit in flux right now,
Yeah.
they're going to have tryouts just prior to the season. And so that's another sport that he's interested in. And it's kind of nice for him to have like a chance at that as well.
Yeah.
The other thing that I've found helpful for a number of students is, it sounds maybe a little bit silly, but face group, face group, Facebook groups for students
Yes.
who have been admitted have been really kind of cool ways for students to connect with future colleagues and
Hmm.
peers, to kind of see what everybody else is thinking about, going to that school, and kind of getting some excitement about being there in the fall, and what that experience is going to be like. And oftentimes they will have those types of groups for current clubs on campus and teams on campus, so that you can connect and start to get information that way too.
Right.
Um, so I think the value of social media for many of these schools is that you can connect directly with current students and kind of see what their thoughts. And I think that that's helping the enthusiasm as well, and helping him feel more secure that he's making the right decision for himself.
Right. If he kind of finds himself like, oh, this is a group of kids that I could hang out with, that of course makes you feel more comfortable. And
Exactly.
theoretically, he would have seen that on an admitted student day. Although I would even argue, I've seen plenty of and been at plenty of admitted student days, sort of leading them myself when I was in admissions, to know that not all kids connect. They don't, many of them will just kind of hang with their parents and not necessarily even talk to the other students. So that makes a
Yep,
lot of sense. Yep.
exactly.
Yeah. So, Kennon, thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who found this video helpful, if you're looking, we have a lot of other COVID-19 impact on admissions and college finance related resources. You can find them on our blog, blog.getintocollege.com. Thanks so much. And thanks, Kennon.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You too.